It's Christmas time. You better believe that I've been reading some Christmas books. And what could be more Christmas in North America than Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? We owe a lot to modern music historian Ronald Lankford because he puts in a lot of work on books about the history of holiday music. He has this other one called like Sleigh Bells and something or other. It was one that I read a couple of years ago about the history of Christmas music in general in North America. This one specifically, as the title suggests, is the history of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It's fascinating. It is a little bit boring because it's very heavy on details, but those details are necessary to understand the journey, the progression of this American classic. And so if you're able to kind of move past those dry details and get the full scope of how this came to be and why it's still such a sensation all these years later, then it's worth the read. I don't want to hold the book up for the entire video though, so I'm going to put this down, and through the magic of editing, there we go. Now I'll just stand over here. It's also actually not that cold in the shop today, so we'll ditch the scarf, but yeah. In 1939, Robert May worked in the advertising department for Montgomery Ward, which was a chain of department stores not unlike Sears. In fact, I think they were contemporaries and competitors with them for a long time. And he was tasked with the marketing campaign for the upcoming Christmas shopping season. Historically, it's important to remember what was going on. 1939 was kind of the closing years of the Depression and the opening years of the World War II era. And the baby boomer generation was just starting to kick off. The baby boom really wouldn't get underway until the mid-1940s, after World War II. But America was looking for a win economically. Franklin Roosevelt had changed the fixed date for Thanksgiving on the calendar so that the Christmas shopping season could be extended, and then the fourth quarter fiscal numbers would look a lot better, which would benefit his presidency. Look what he's doing for the economy, blah, blah, blah. All that had a trickle-down effect to the largest corporations in America trying to make sure that their Christmas shopping season was very successful. And that would all come down to the efficacy of their marketing. Robert May was a widower that year, and he had a young daughter. And so he was working through the difficulty of being a single father, being a widower, and also having to come up with something that would be catchy, something that would get shoppers' attention, something that would make them say, I want to come to Montgomery Ward to buy Christmas presents for everybody that I know. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was the ultimate result of that. He wanted to write a jingle, a rhyme, a little kid's ditty, and he worked on it for months. The story goes on to say that he even picked a reindeer because Santa had reindeer pulling his sleigh, and his daughter loved the deer at the local zoo, and he wanted to do something to please his daughter. Choosing the name Rudolph was just a matter of having an R name so it could fit Rudolph, Red-Nosed Reindeer. He was going to go with the red nose. He was having the story kind of echo the basic point of the ugly duckling. Here's a guy who was mocked and scorned for his looks by everybody else, but by the end, rather than becoming beautiful like the duckling did, turning into a swan, he becomes, useful to the cause. So he picks the deer, he picks, an R name. He even had it narrowed down to like Rudolph and Reginald, and, Reginald sounded too British, so he went with the one that sounded German. Heck of a time to do that there, Bob. And they got an illustrator, they put it on paper, they printed off copies, and it was going to be part of a free giveaway to anybody who came and did their shopping at Montgomery Ward's stores that season. And it was just a runaway hit. People loved it, they loved the story behind it, they loved the story in it, the illustrations. They gave away millions and millions of copies. In fact, over the course of 2 or 3 different seasons when they gave away printed copies of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, not in consecutive years, 1939 and 1946 were the big years, a total of 6 million printed copies were given away. And this was not at a time when the population of the US was over 300 million. So that was pretty significant. And it did its job. Montgomery Ward had incredible Christmas shopping seasons those years, and even in the war years, they did okay, and in the post-war years, they did a lot better. This was at a time, too, when staff marketers, people who worked for the company, creating things for the company, didn't really get the individual credit that they got for what they created for the company because, hey, the company paid for it, so the company owns it. But years after the fact, the CEO of Montgomery Ward gave the print rights, the ownership rights, back to Robert May. There are a couple of reasons as to why. Lankford gets into that in the book. But that was massive because this was a character that still had capital value. Whether or not Montgomery Ward realized that is a subject of some debate. They might have thought that they were done with it, but things were really just getting started for this precocious little Christmas character. Now, mentioning the rights is significant because various forms of the rights were then sold off to different entities over the next couple of years. This group wanted to do a song about it. This group wanted to publish children's book about it. Another company might have wanted to do comic books. And so different rights were sold to different groups, and different forms of the character became more popular than others. Little Golden Books did those, little simple kids' board books about Rudolph. He went on all kinds of different adventures, even some where his ego got the better of him and he became, kind of like evil Superman, like, look, I'm the best, I'm most powerful, I'm the most important reindeer, blah, blah, blah. He had character arcs throughout these stories. There's also a run of Rudolph comics from DC, and so that went in another direction. But the most significant one was probably the song performed by Gene Autry in the early 1960s, which was then put into the Rankin and Bass Claymated special in 1964. And that was when it reached a whole new audience 25 years after the original was made. And that's the one that we know and love today, even though it often receives cultural criticism, which is well due for the fact that everybody in this story not named Rudolph, Hermie, or Yukon Cornelius, and this includes up to Santa Claus, is just a complete tool. You're like, oh, your son's got a birth defect. Donner, you should be ashamed of yourself. What? Something was lost in translation from the original ugly duckling parallel to whatever the heck Rankin and Bass put on the screen in 1964. But maybe they also were just kind of caught up in the fact that people didn't watch things over and over again back then. VCRs weren't a thing, repeat viewings weren't a thing. If you missed something on TV, you just flat out missed it. And even though I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s, I remember my parents telling me about that. There was a time growing up when you didn't get to tape something and watch it later. If you missed it, you missed it. And so people didn't chew it up and digest it over and over again and become more and more critical of it as time went on. It was just, we saw it, we liked the claymation, we liked how the character was redeemed in the end, or became useful, and everybody got along, and we pulled the teeth out of this abominable snowman and pushed him off a cliff, and he's going to die a week later of starvation. They don't think about that stuff. They just, it's Christmas, it's claymated, it's in a snowy village, happy colors, yay. But it was a perennial favorite after that. In 1989, they had a 25-year anniversary rebroadcast, re-airing thing of the cartoon on TV. I think I remember seeing it one of those years because it became an annual thing after that, down at my mama's house when I was a little kid. That was also the 50th anniversary of the original print edition, but the story in the print edition and in the song and in the claymated special, they're all a little bit different. I mean, obviously the song and the special are similar, but the original version that Bob May wrote is distinct from the more popular version that we know today. This is why it's important to track, who had the rights to what, who wrote what in, who added this, that, and the other thing. Other sequels and tie-in properties have been attempted over the years. None were nearly as successful as the original, and this secular, ex nihilo character was pretty much the only thing added to the mythos and the lore of Christmas in North America in the 20th century that really stuck. They tried capitalizing on it, different entities have over the years, by adding to it or doing more with it. But really people have just decided that it's the original that we like to hold on to. We'll buy little figures and Christmas ornaments of Hermie and Santa and Rudolph and Sam the Snowman, and we'll hang those on our tree, and that'll be that. I thought this book was fascinating. I don't want to just say, oh, interesting, because that's kind of a hollow word. It was fascinating to see what you can find when you dig deep enough and do enough research into how the things that we have today became as popular or as fixed in our culture as they are. And I think Lankford has done a lot of thankless work to preserve the history of things that we might not otherwise think about. And it's especially important to do that while he still has the resources accessible to him. I mean, he had to go to colleges to look at their archives, to look at the personal papers of Robert May, to do a lot of the historical research on this, getting information from original sources, which is an underappreciated quality in historians and, to a significantly lesser extent, journalists these days. He did a lot of hard work to find hard facts about this thing that we still know and love even today in 2023. So I do recommend this book. Grab a copy and take some time to dig through it and just see what Christmases of yesteryear were like. How unlikely it was to make a cultural edition that would receive as much widespread acclaim as this little ditty story rhyme thing that Robert May did, partly for his job, partly for his daughter, and see the facts of it. I think it's great. I think you guys might like it. So check that out. Links are in the description below. Subscribe, share, comment. Let me know what you guys think of Rudolph. And until next time, drive safe. See you out there.